I think the greatest form of value that every organization, whether it's operations or revenue teams, of course, but I think the best form of value that anybody can drive is revenue. I always go to, let's start with the end in mind. A lot of times in operations teams, you're told by leadership that, hey, you need to treat the people you're supporting like it's your customer base. And I agree with that. I like the sentiment of it. However, I prefer the idea of having partners in business. I think, if somebody's your customer, you don't always share all the nitty gritty. You don't share the ugly at what's going on under the hood. You're not completely transparent. But if somebody's your partner, you are fully transparent, you're responsive, you're in it together. You're also having tough conversations and not avoiding things for the sake of keeping a good face. And of course, you got to use tact and skill to make sure that you're navigating the nuances of the dynamic really well. But I think, in addition to that, having the right mindset in that you don't point your cannons, inward, right? That everybody's same team, and we're all driving towards one mission, and that's to help the company get to where we want to go.
Awesome. I was going to ask you a question, but I felt like you've already answered it. So, like thinking about building a really great relationship, what do you think that shared mission is, and how do you, translate this mission and then make sure that everyone remembers what's actually going on to keep that focus?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not a good golfer, but I did take some golf lessons, and one of the first questions that they asked me was, what is the point of golf to you? And in my mind, I was like, well, to get a really low score, right? That's the point of golf. And he's like, all right, that's a good answer. Because for a lot of people, the point of golf is to go drink beer, it's to have fun, it's to work on their tan, it's to do all the social things, and those are all good. But if you don't remember that the main point is to get a low score, you kind of will have the wrong motivations, or even the motivations may not even be there. So I think it's clear to begin with the end in mind. The both teams, or all the teams, need to understand that this is the company's goals, this is our vision, this is how we get there. It's by having great sales strategies, go to market, great solutions, and great internal processes, so we don't get things bogged down. So beginning with the end in mind, and then setting up really great, clear forms of communication. I've thought this for many years now, that email and text are probably some of the worst forms of communication out there. Is why you do things like this, where you can see each other, you can read body language, you have a chance to to understand intent, which intent is really, really important for teams. So we tend to, the old cliche, we tend to judge others on their actions, but ourselves on our intent. But that doesn't have to be the case. As long as good communication is taking place, what you're trying to accomplish together, you can develop trust and foster that. So the frequency of meetings, the style of meetings, having, in today's day and age, whether it's Zoom or ideally face to face, and just laying things out clearly, and making sure that you're focused on the right outcomes will really help with that.
Awesome. It's kind of like if you guys have the same goal, you're assuming the same intent, because you're both sides are trying to get to a specific location. So that's awesome.
Right.
And Jason, I know you lead quite a big team. So what would the process look like to keep this communication structured and regular for the leaders listening?
Yeah. I really like the idea of a matrixed organization. So, in teams like sales ops, or just operation teams in general, you really do need to have a organization that is effectively siloed. You need somebody that's a leader in operations. You have analysts. You need a leader that understands analytics, and they understand the business intelligence solutions and all of that. But I love the idea of a matrix organization that, especially if you have regional teams or global teams, where you can position your resources in a way that they are directly aligned to their counterparts in those markets, So those markets feel like they have somebody that they can directly go to. There's no question on who their person is. And they can do, again, going back to the things we talked about before, develop that trust, foster the relationship, and kind of understand each other better, because there's more of a dotted line that directly connects them to that operations resource. So I think that's a great way to position the organization for success.
Awesome. Okay, so with these siloed leaders, to what extent can they see into other people's funnels? And what would you say the advantages of having it in the way that you're describing? What is the, like, why? Why do we do this?
Yeah, well, every organization is different. So every sales team I've ever supported, somebody in that org, leading that org, they think they've got a corner on how business should be done. And that's fine. And at the end of the day, I don't think that there's one single sales philosophy or go-to-market philosophy that this is the best one. It's kind of like when you think about marketing content, very little marketing content on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 10 or it's a 1. But it doesn't really matter. As long as you have a philosophy and it's a good philosophy, it actually works, then people can learn it, adopt it, embrace it, and get behind it. So having that matrix organization and having people that are directly connected to that regional team or that group of people, it doesn't necessarily have to be designed by region, but they have a specific resource. They can learn that philosophy of that leader in that region or the salespeople in that region. They can adopt that philosophy, and they can build resources around it. They can build great reporting, and they can improve, CRM workflows and things like that. You probably heard my 4-year-old scream in the background. It was a fun.
He agrees.
Yeah. So we can build those reports. We can build those great sales flows in Salesforce or the CRMs. We can connect the dots between marketing and the outcomes that local sales and revenue team is trying to drive. Because there are a lot of nuances. And at the end of the day, you can have really good ideas for how things should work. But if other people aren't willing to adopt it or embrace it, then the idea is not going to get traction. So again, it's about positioning the organization in a way that they're going to be able to work together to get a lot of great energy and a lot of great outcomes very quickly.
You've hit the nail on the head there. So you talk about process, and it's important to get behind an idea. It has to be a good idea, of course, but you can have some flexibility. Could you tell me about culture? To what extent would you say the other leaders need to get involved to help build a specific message, like the CEO and his message, or the CRO and their message?
Yeah, it's great. I read something that really stuck with me, that leaders earn the most respect from the organization, the further up you go, when they can showcase their understanding of systems, processes, products, solutions, engineering, and they understand not just what their job is, but what they actually do, some of the systems that they interact with, and how those things work. And so I think first thing is, it's like, I heard this a long time ago, that trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. I think that one thing that leaders can do to get buy-in from the organizations and to help their teams work really well together is to showcase their understanding what their teams are dealing with in both challenges, but also in the solutions that they're using every day to build products or processes internally. And then relaying the outcome. This is our revenue goal, or this is our go-to-market strategy, our new market expansion idea. And then connecting the dots between this great idea and all the things you guys do and how it impacts that. I think the greatest form of value that every organization, whether it's operations or revenue teams, of course, but I think the best form of value that anybody can drive is revenue. And I have a bunch of analysts. I've got a bunch of administrative, data administrative people. I've got system admins and developers. And, my one of the things I like to do is try to connect what they're doing day to day with a revenue outcome. I want them to understand that you're not just building a report, you're building something that's going to educate and equip people to go effectively cross-sell and upsell and be consultative in selling to clients to help us drive to that 10,000 client goal that we want to achieve, or the $100 million mark that we're going to get to. I like to connect the projects that they're doing that can really oftentimes feel cumbersome and kind of unseen to great outcomes and driving, towards the company vision.
It goes back to what you said before about why do you play golf, and it's to get the lowest score possible. If you remember that, then everything, you're a winner. Okay. What about tech then? So is there any tech that's played a part that's helped you?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many good solutions out there today. I think our tech stack, when I think about, all right, if I just took all the probably dozens of vendors that we work with, or the first ones that come to mind are, of course, Salesforce. We leverage heavily Marketo. Today, for client like sales engagement tools, we're using currently some solutions like High Velocity Sales and New Voice Media, who are our cadencing solution for our BDRs and sellers. New Voice is a soft phone solution, and they've been fine. They've been reliable resources. LinkedIn, of course, has been an excellent resource for mid-market and enterprise sellers. Their LinkedIn Enterprise Edition is great. I think they've added a lot of great features to that. That's made that a very, very not just a effective tool for sales, but also a user-friendly tool and a great system-friendly tool. One of the things that I think every operations or systems person has dealt with is integrating solutions that don't work well together, that don't work well on a single machine at the same time. And it's kind of like, if you have 3 privacy extensions in your Chrome browser, and, you have all these things that are trying to do the same stuff, they oftentimes conflict and fail and just don't work the way that you'd want them to work. So we really try to think about, all right, if our primary tech solution is Salesforce, that one of the first lenses that we're going to look at all of our other solutions through is the lens of, is it going to be compatible and work well with Salesforce? Are we going to have a lot of licensing update issues? Are they not a certified partner? And we're going to have all kinds of interruptions in service just simply because, this is a unknown application to Salesforce that because of the latest change in certifications or licensing, they don't qualify and their service has been paused. So that's a lens we look through. I would say one of the newer vendors that we've started exploring that's been kind of exciting. It's less of a tech solution, more of a procurement solution. It's a company called Vendor, VENDR. Terrible name, great service though, where they take your tech stack and they own some of the negotiation and the pricing discussions with your vendors, and they have a great solution set up where effectively, if you have $1 million worth of vendor tech stack spend, they'll take that and they'll say, we'll manage all this for you, and it's going to cost 80 grand for a year. And if we don't drive 160 grand in savings after the year, we pay you back the 80 grand. So that's been a very interesting one from the perspective of procurement and the amount of time and energy that's devoted to that. Procurement is a very time-consuming thing, and I do have a background in it, and the concept of exploring all your different vendor solutions, third-party solutions, figuring out which of them have all the features and functions you want, involving all the right decision makers internally, and then going through all the pricing and contract negotiations is incredibly time-consuming. And quite honestly, it's a skill set a lot of people just never developed or worked on. So we've been leveraging a company called Vendor to take over a lot of that exploratory discussion. So if we say, hey, we want a solution that does X, Y, Z, they know the market, they know the options, they'll help us find those options. And we'll go through the typical, what is your functionality? Does it meet all of our needs? We'll do all the demos and conversation with the internal stakeholders here. And then they'll own a lot of the contract and pricing negotiations. So it's just less of a lift for us. And at the end of the day, they have all the skin in the game that they owe us our investment back if they're not able to drive 2x the savings. So it's a benefit for us in 2 ways. One, financially, we save money, but 2, we save our people a ton of time having to go through all the discussions, exploratory conversations, and negotiations.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Great name. Vendor.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm really excited to ask you this question. Could you talk to me about mistakes? when it comes to building really great relationships, and how did you overcome it? Are there any stories or philosophies that you would think about till this day?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Mistakes are just part of the process, of course. But, early in my career, I was an analyst, and my head was really big, without a doubt. And I worked at a large company, very large company. It was a Fortune 500 business here in the US, and had 20 something thousand employees. And a lot of the executive teams were not analytical minds. They were business leaders. But in my youth, in my early 20s, I would come into these meetings where we'd be doing quarter end evaluations, and we would a lot of financial reports, and I would get in there and I would debate and argue, and I would challenge people on what the data showed. And I really, from an early age, I adopted the mindset of like, I'm going to make data driven decisions, and I'm going to influence using data, because you just really can't argue with it. And the thing is, like, I oftentimes was right, but how I went about it was totally wrong. There's a great book out there called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think my strategy was like how to lose friends and repel people at the time. And so kind of going back to what I said earlier is that I had great ideas, but because I couldn't get adoption or people on board with it, they just never had traction. So for a couple of years, I just grinded. I was working really hard. And I was learning all kinds of new skills and ways to manage data, but I wasn't successful in influencing people. And so I had to learn that sometimes it's not about it's not about doing the thing that you think is best, but rather getting progression through agreement and finding middle ground, and nudging things in the right direction. One of the things I've taken on at my current company is commercial compensation. And we've had, like many organizations, there can be a lot of variations of compensation plans and ways to measure it, and how letters are sent and formatted, and all the different inputs and how they're calculated and reviewed by the sales team. And it's almost like an infinite number of combinations. And it's almost like it's like every organization is dead set on building an infinite number of comp plans. And so, one of the things that I've been doing is I know I have a philosophy on how comp really should work based on the research I've done, based on all the books and articles and conversations I've had. I have a philosophy on how it should work. But I knew better than to go in from day one and try to just shift everything over to it. I knew I'd be met with opposition from leadership because it's a massive change in the organization. I knew I'd be met with opposition from the individual sales leaders, BDRs, and support crew, the account managers and whatnot, because it affects them. And then again, it's kind of venturing into the unknown. Change is always hard, even if it's a positive change. So what I've been doing over the last 18 months is really just nudging the business in that direction. And we've made lots of great changes using small groups to prove concept, and then roll it out further and further and further. So those are some things I've learned for sure. Organizationally, I would say I've learned that that positioning a team to your external counterparts, as I mentioned before, is a critical thing. Again, you can have a highly skilled team that's very effective at the jobs you hired them to do. But if you don't also position them to align to the people they know they need to support, and then instill in them the thoughts of, these are your people. Yes, if you do your job perfectly as described by the job description, that's great. But what's even better is if the subjective, the anecdotal feedback that I hear from those people that you're aligned to is extremely positive, that's even better. That's even more powerful, because again, you can be great at your job, but if the people you're supporting aren't a fan of how you're doing it, or the things that you're doing, or don't understand what you're doing, I wouldn't say that's a complete success. So those are some things I've learned.